Welcome back to Film Hooligans. I'm John, the host, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jason Alt.
Why am I co-host? You didn't say, "Hey, I'm John. I'm co-hosting this podcast with my other co-host." I would like to feel like we're equals, even though you do all the editing and social media.
True. I'm trying to maybe exploit you a little bit because we're talking about a nunsploitation film. That's Fountaine and the Vengeful Nun Who Wouldn't Die, directed by James Dean.
Not that James Dean.
Not James
that
Dean.
Other James Dean either. The non-problematic, non-dead James Dean.
Correct.
With his directorial, editorial. Well, editorial is for editing. What do you say for writing? Scribatorial? Look, this guy he did the movie.
He did it. He did
Executive
it all.
producer, writer, editor.
Yes.
Director. James Dean with his first effort. What did you think, John? Tell us what is Fountaine and the Vengeful Nun Who Wouldn't Die?
Whew, what a name. That name is just super grabby by itself. It's awesome.
It's very 1970s for sure.
Yes, and that is exactly what this film is. It is a perfect encapsulation of a very niche subgenre of, there was a huge following, a cult following for nunsploitation films. So nunsploitation is kind of like it sounds like. It's like a sexploitation or an exploitation film featuring nuns in violent and sexual ways. I didn't know that we would ever be reviewing one of those, or one of these would even be being made in, our year of 2021. But I think, my initial thoughts on it was he pulled it off. What did you think, Jay?
This reminds me of like a less problematic Sucker Punch almost. Right? Like this had some Kill Bill elements to it. Yeah. Like this, it's, I'm not going to say that this looked like Quentin Tarantino directed it, but for a first time director, writer, executive producer, and editor, I feel like James Dean nailed a lot of the fundamentals.
And I feel like a lot of the directors, like your Robert Rodriguez's, like your Quentin Tarantino's, spend a lot of money to make their films look cheap. Where this one is just like boots on the ground, let's strap them up, let's just go to work, let's do the actual dirty stuff, and it is such a throwback. It's not the greatest strength of this film is also the biggest weakness as far as recommending it to a broad audience, because there is a very finite amount of people that would find enjoyment in this, but who this is for, they're gonna
love it.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a throwback film. Basically, the plot of Fountaine and the Vengeful Nun Who Wouldn't Die is there is a nun named Mary whose sister is killed with an overdose, and she basically goes on a revenge kick and Kill Bill katanas her way through the church and like her kung fu master and some Nazis, and she will just she'll cut everybody in half until she gets to her sister's killer. If it sounds like I'm giving a lot of the plot away, that kind of plot is pretty consistent through a lot of the 70s. By exploitation, I mean the variable X.
Right.
Like blaxploitation. And in this case, nunsploitation. It just has a very throwback feel to it. So it's not like entirely a new way the plot unfolds, but there are some original aspects to the writing as well.
Yeah, and if a movie like this is going to succeed, it's going to be now, because this type of thing is coming back. Like, I think I've mentioned before that we are kind of leaving, as like a broad audience, everyone's kind of getting over the 80s, and they're kind of flirting with the 90s, but also the 70s are really kind of making a comeback, like with a movie like X that just came out. It's the A24 movie that's just like going ham at the box office right now. It's because people are really kind of looking back into those grindhouse-esque type of films, and I think this is a perfect time for this, and it's pretty accessible.
Yeah, because you're right. Everybody made everything ironically in the 80s. And in the 70s, everything was for like, it was dirty.
Yeah.
You would get $10,000 from a dead relative, and you're like, let me make this piece of shit.
Well, and it's the zombie vampire thing. It's like, we're at war right now, like putting a timestamp on this. Like, we don't want the bubblegum pop of the 80s. We want the dirty grit in the
Because the 80s are like, wow, can you believe a house is $12,000 and I've worked as a waiter for 4 hours a week to pay for college? I better make sure my kids don't get any of this. So when you see the 80s and everybody was wearing shoulder pads and doing cocaine and just like buying 40 houses, you're like, do I really want to see that?
Right.
Do I want to see a movie from the perspective of the generation that had it better than both their parents and their kids?
Right.
Or do I want to see a nun cut a dude's arm off with a katana and then a bunch of blood sprays out like in the Addams Family movie?
Exactly.
I know what I'm picking.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the perfect movie for the perfect time, I guess. But, you know, you said fundamentals, and as far as in the scope of this genre, it is such a love letter to the genre because it is cheesy at the right moments, but it also has some really great stunt work from the cast. It also has some fun effects and some great locations for a movie like, you know, I don't want to say like a movie like this, like I'm talking down to it, but just like at the beginning of the film, we start out with these great like sweeping shots of this graveyard and then into a church, like a full-on cathedral, which kind of like you don't expect for a film of this stature to have access to those type of deals. So that was a little bit impressive as far as the production value of this film went.
Now, John, you're saying a film like this, a film of this stature, it's a little murky maybe for some of our viewers to know what you're talking about. Now, you're being very careful not to like poop on this film too much, but there are some drawbacks to a first-time director, EP, writer, editor, right?
Right.
So when you say a film of this stature, to what are you referring specifically?
Well, this is from first-time filmmaker James Dean, and James Dean is...
Not that James Dean and not that James Dean either.
Right. So, I mean, this is literally his film school, right? Like, he is... But he's displaying such good fundamentals that a lot of other first time filmmakers with probably triple or quadruple the budgets fail to get right. So it's structured well. It looks like a movie. It sounds like a movie, which is that sounds like a small nitpick, but that's huge. It's like, tell me you don't know what you're doing by showing me you don't know what you're doing with the sound.
You know how you hear like your TI-83 calculator is more powerful than the like lunar excursion module from the 1950s that landed them on the moon,
right?
Like, hear shit like that, but think about it. Your iPhone has a better microphone than the microphone Steven Spielberg used to make E.T. So, like, we're getting well past the point where we're like, I can't believe this sounds good, because, like, Steven Soderbergh makes movies on an iPhone. So, like, I'm not saying that this movie was made on an iPhone or even sounds like it was made on an iPhone. I'm saying technology is such that, like, at this point, like, praising a movie's sound mixing isn't, I don't know. They give it an Academy Award for it. Sound mixing is probably harder than I think it is. But at least from when you sit down as a first-time editor, at least you don't have complete dog crap to try to mix, right? Like,
sure.
Everything that went into a microphone got recorded with a higher degree of fidelity than, like, more accomplished directors were used to in the 1970s. So you actually kind of have to spend a little money to make this look like a exploitation movie. And, you know, I thought that was charming because the movie was actually like reverse edited to look worse a little bit from like a sound design and like some of the blood spray and stuff like that. Oh, spoiler alert, there's blood spray in a movie called Fountaine and the Vengeful Nun Who Wouldn't Die because other people did die.
Yes. Again, it's hard, like, who we recommend this for. I guess I'll kick that off. It's playing on Tubi right now, so it's very accessible, and that's awesome too. A first-time filmmaker with has at least the backing to get the distribution onto a streaming site like, you know, Tubi. Like, go there.
This will sound like a Tubi commercial, but
not a sponsor.
But there weren't as many commercials as I've never watched anything on Tubi before. Like, you're like, the movie's on Tubi, and I was like, oh boy, you know. It's like, download the Crackle app and give it your banking information and a retinal scan, and then you can watch Transformers with commercials.
You didn't do that? Shit, I better.
I don't know.
I'll call you back.
If you're like, well, I'm not getting Tubi. Tubi's free.
Yeah.
And Tubi has fewer commercials than you probably think. I know you're a spoiled millennial and you've spent the last 10 years be like, I cut the cord. I don't have it. I haven't seen a commercial in 15 years.
Right.
Well, there are 7 commercials right now. One is for Tide, one's for Liberty Mutual, and one's like a really long commercial where a kid comes home from Iraq and his dad bought him a Chevy truck or something. The point is, you'll see 3 commercials, but you'll see a movie for free.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. Normally we're like, hey, this is worth the $7 on Amazon Prime, but this movie is 100% free, provided you don't mind sending a urine sample to Tubi to verify your identity.
That's true. Would you recommend it broadly or to a very niche audience?
If you heard the word exploitation and said, oh, tell me more, you would like this movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. That's our thoughts on James Dean's directorial and all the other torial debuts for Fountaine and the Vengeful Nun Who Wouldn't Die. Jason.
I think it's Fountaine. There's a U in there. If you type in Fountaine, you're not going to get it. It's Fountaine, as in I saw a blood fountain when a dude got his arm cut off with a katana, and that was pretty tight. I liked that.
True. Yeah. Where can everyone find you?
I'm at Twitter at Jason E. Alt, and I have a pinned tweet. That is my link tree, and it's got the links to all the other stuff I do. You might find I do some other stuff you're into. But thanks for watching my movie podcast where I'm the co-host.
That's right. And you can follow me at John the Host on Twitter.
John the co-host.
You can also follow the show at film_hooligans. And we'll see you next time.